let's dive it back to Africa, right? Obviously, we've already said that neocolonialism is not only for African countries, right? It happens all over the world as well. But in Africa, there is one form of neocolonialism that has been endemic.
Yes.
It has gone on since the Second World War, since they started giving these countries their independence.
Independence and freedom.
Yeah, and that is France and its former colonies in West Africa, in West and Central Africa, to be honest. And one of the ways this neocolonialism takes shape, basically, is financial neocolonialism, right? So in Western Africa, the French-speaking parts of Western Africa and some French-speaking parts of Central Africa, they use a currency called like CFA franc.
Yeah.
The name of CFA franc is pretty much is one of the name basically of the full meaning rather of the CFA franc is pretty much French colony in Africa's franc. Like that's pretty much that's like the name of the currency, French colonies in Africa franc. Yeah, right, and they're still using it till today.
They said they want to deviate from
we're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So they're still using the colonial currency till today. Yeah. And I started to research on that colonial currency. Like, okay, maybe it's just the name that is bad. Maybe it's just it. But I found out some important things, right? And one of them is that although they've made in 2019 they made some changes, but before 2019, that CFA franc basically is produced in France.
Yes.
Right. So the French central bank or monetary agency is what determines the policy in collaboration with some of those countries as well. It's what determines the monetary policy of that currency. Number one. Number two, before the latest changes that were made, each of those countries needed to have 50% of their foreign reserves in France.
Yeah.
Yes.
50% of your foreign reserves have to be in France. The remaining 20%, you have to keep it down. 20% out of the remaining, you have to keep it down as a form of collateral for maybe any form of financial issues that may arise in the future, because France tends to bail them out, basically. If they enter into financial troubles, France will bail you out, right? That's part of the agreement, right? So at the end of the day, you have only 30%, you have access to only 30% of your foreign reserves, right? Meaning, I mean, even in Nigeria, we know how foreign reserves they deal with our naira now. Like, so, but in those countries, you have access to only 30% of your foreign reserves to trade with other countries and all of that. Obviously, that's going to lead to financial or economic stagnancy. If you are making in let's say you bring in $100 billion foreign reserves, of which most of them don't even do, by the way. Let's say you bring in $100 billion in your foreign reserves, or $1 billion in your foreign reserves. You have access to only 200 million rather. You have access to only $200 million out of an entire $1 billion to trade with other countries. It's going to affect your economy, right? And although in 2019 they revised it, but the core tenets are still there in place. You understand? So when you think of, and you think that it would end there, but it didn't only end there. Also in the political aspect as well, there have been allegations that many of those governments or the democratic presidents that were elected were corrupt or too closely aligned with French interests. And that's why, in just the past 2 years, you start seeing that there was a coup in Mali, a coup in Burkina Faso, a coup in Niger as well. And it seems like it's a trend that is starting to gain traction in, African geopolitics as well. So yeah, when you look at this concept of French neocolonialism, why do you think it still persists up to today? This is like 2024.
I think one reason it still persists is France doesn't want to let them go.
Yes, they help the economy a lot.
That's the simple and short answer. France doesn't want to let them go. The UK would have done something similar if they thought about it. They just didn't have. It probably didn't occur to them. It's probably when France, they are like, oh, this would have been good. Because I mean, you see them with the Commonwealth Organization. Yeah, they say it's a voluntary organization, but all the members are former colonies of the United Kingdom.
That's what it's about.
So France doesn't want to let these people go. Another thing is that the government in those countries benefit from this system as well.
Yeah.
Because you look at those countries, you see that some of them have the longest service. You see Paul Biya in Cameroon.
Yeah.
the Togolese president. I don't remember his name, but he has been there for a while.
Yeah.
I
Very long
can't
time.
remember the last time they had any other leader apart from him.
Yeah.
That,
In Cote d'Ivoire, you had the same issue, although that led to a civil war where you had two sides fighting, France supporting one side.
Yeah.
You see that those countries tend to have leaders that are a lot authoritarian,
Yeah.
and they have closely aligned, as you said, with France's interests. So that's one of the reasons why it has not ended. So the leaders know that once I get to power, once I align with France, it's all set.
Okay.
I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
And for those countries too, there's the other part that you didn't mention is that the currency is linked to the euro. So the euro is
Yes.
like is edged towards the euro. So and the euro is a very stable currency, meaning that the C franc is very stable. Now, before we used to have lots of West African workers in Nigeria from
Yeah,
Togo, from Benin.
Yeah.
Over the past 1 year, lots of them are going back to their countries because their currencies have been stable, whilst Nigeria's has gone, like the inflation has affected
I
our
agree with you.
economy
I agree with you
to
on
the
that.
point where their currency is even more valuable than ours. So even though the world has gone through so much turmoil, the currency is still stable. So there's this kind of like confidence, or this, there's no pressure
Yeah.
because they can keep doing the same thing and people are not really getting so much of it. The government can not do anything and people will still eat. But Nigeria now, we've had one of the worst economic crises that we've
Yeah.
had in a long time.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I think that they've not changed it. Because there were mentions of the ECOWAS currency. A lot of people speculated that maybe France prevented the ECO from taking off. And I think that even Nigeria wasn't that serious with, because Nigeria is like the largest country in the ECOWAS. We are the ones that can really push
Yes.
for that kind of thing to
You have
happen.
over like 45% of the GDP.
So if Nigeria doesn't actually actively push it, it's not going to happen. Even though France too, there's talk that France, because obviously France wouldn't want such a currency to come into place because that would totally replace France in
Yeah.
West Africa.
Yeah.
So I want to say something about this France issue.
Yeah.
If there is a country that will never escape these allegations of neocolonialism,
It's France.
it's France.
Yes, most definitely.
They will never escape it. And they are a very dangerous country because they don't want freedom for these people. They might say that, oh, we did it out of the goodness of our heart to ensure that this money is not being destroyed, because there was a time Nigeria was having issues with our national reserve being depleted, right?
Yes.
But it's like you're treating them like children that don't have the ability to
Yes,
make their
make
own
decisions,
decisions.
yes.
Do you understand?
Yes,
And
babies.
you look at Africa and look at West Africa generally. That is why during the last election, I see a lot of people writing letters to US saying that, oh, the election conducted in Nigeria was fraudulent, the US should come in and intervene. But if you are sitting in the White House, right, and you look at West Africa as a whole, and you look at which country is even having what resembles a stable democracy, even though the election looks like fraud, but at least it still looks like it is something. At least power is still being exchanged. You see that, oh, okay, I'll pick Nigeria, I'll pick Ghana, then which other ones? You will not, you see, after the election in Nigeria, you say, well done. At least you guys are conducting elections. Do you understand? And when you look at it again, in West Africa, I also want us to deviate from looking at things and saying that, oh, the problem of West Africa, the problem of Africa is neocolonialism, right? Let's look at it in West Africa. How many countries, how many presidents are making major decisions to improve the life of their citizens? Look at West Africa as a whole. West Africa is there. We don't have, apart from the passport that unites us, we don't have a currency. Something like that. Look at Europe. Europe ensured that a currency was available that strengthened the currencies of individual countries. Do you understand? And I can understand that, okay, maybe some parties don't want the progress of West Africa, but look at Africa as a whole.
Yeah, the Africans don't want the progress of Africa.
Look at Africa. No. Just look at African Union. How strong is African Union? How powerful is African Union? How is African Union coming together to help other African countries? I don't know if you understand the problem here. And I will give you one other example of neocolonialism and how it is still taking form. I mentioned African Development Bank.
Yeah.
And you know that in African Development Bank, Nigeria is the highest shareholder there. After Nigeria, guess the country?
The US.
The US. After the US, we have I think we have France, we have
Japan is
we have UK. Yes. Do you understand? A bank that is created to ensure the growth of Africa. The current president of African Development Bank, Femi Adesina, thank you. He wanted to be hoisted out.
Yes.
If not for Buhari that stood behind him. The US wanted to remove him. Do you understand? Because he was making decisions and policies that were ensuring the growth of agriculture in Africa as a whole. So if you look at that very well, if you look at those scenarios, you see that neocolonialism is still heavily embedded and still happening, but majorly economically. But let me say this last thing, right? Africa's biggest problem, and I stand by this, Africa's biggest problem is not neocolonialism. Africa's biggest problem is the kind of leaders we have, right? Look at South Africa. Is South Africa not a country in Africa? It is a country in Africa, but South Africa is one of the best performing countries in Africa. But even though 10% of the population controls about 80% of the wealth in South Africa, and that is controlled majorly by the white minorities. Do you understand? Now, that is also a place of neocolonialism also happening. But you will not, if you look at South Africa, you might say South Africa is progressing because they have a lot of white people there. If you look at Africa as a whole, we have poor leaders, bad leaders. Is it because of neocolonialism we cannot harness our national resources? Is it neocolonialism that has made us not have a refinery in Nigeria for how long?
Some people will say that it does play a role.
Okay.
Yeah, some people say that many of these bad governments that are being brought into power are deliberately sustained by some neocolonial.
A lot of conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Yes.
We call it a conspiracy theory.
It's conspiracy theory because a lot of
It
them
is.
can't substantiate them.
It is conspiracy theories. Okay, look at Rwanda. Rwanda is a country that is doing very well. If you've been to Rwanda, you see that it has good roads, it takes care of its citizens, it has a strong passport. There has been one leader there that has been leading them for how long? Even though I'm not in support of that, right? Even though I'm not in support of that, but he has been there leading them for a very long time. But still, that is an African country being led by an African man. Is neocolonialism affecting them? Would you say it is affecting them directly?
They are not the ones suffering the neocolonialism currently, but they are doing it to the Congo, allegedly.
Okay.
Right? In the sense that
Okay.
there has been if there's something you can call an everlasting civil war, it's the civil war that's going on in Congo region. Congo is like one of the biggest deposits of lithium
Yes.
in the world.
Sure.
These guys are supposed to be massively rich. They
Cobalt
have
too.
mass.
Yes.
If you look at
That-
Congo,
that's
it's like
another-
one of the biggest countries in Africa.
God bless
Yeah.
you. That's another instance of neocolonialism too.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Yeah. So, but there's an everlasting civil war going on, and part of it started with the Rwanda genocide. After many of the Hutus were sent out of the country when the Tutsis won the war, what they did was that I think the Tutsi government rather that won, or the army that won, wanted to kind of keep those elements at bay, right? So since then they've been funding this sort of like attack on, allegedly attacks on Congo, basically to destroy those elements, right, and to keep them away from their borders. And then they've been blamed for it for a lot of times. They deny it, but there are a whole lot of evidence is basically that some media agencies have found that show that they are supplying weapons to these rebels, because the rebels have now metamorphosed from just fighting Rwanda to now fighting the Congolese government that was
Properly.
there. Yeah.
M24
So it's like
rebels.
exactly. So it's like a endemic civil war that looks like it has
But
no
look
end.
at Congo. Please, I want to ask you. Look at Congo. If, let's say, yes, there is currently civil war there, but they control one of the most important natural resources that is needed for technological advancement, right? We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Imagine a country like Ukraine, let me say Ukraine, have access, is the one in that war. Even though Ukraine is still in war, do you know that Ukraine still produce some things and still export?
Yeah, but they already have
They
that
have illegal.
template.
Look at
No.
they have
You know, I
illegal.
wanted to mention Ukraine-Russia war as a form of new
My brother,
colonialism.
wait, calm down. Let's calm
I will
down.
not even agree with that. But
Me,
we
I'm-
can go
See,
there.
as a form of what?
We can
New
go there.
colonialism.
It is now.
How is this a form of
It
colonialism?
is.